I think success is doing more of what you want and less of what you don't want. Great leaders or great founders, they're not great because they push really hard. It's not necessarily how hard they grind, it's how well prepared they are. What I want to focus on is the lag measures, which are much more about skill. These skills cannot be improved by pushing harder, they can only be improved by preparing better.
Austin Willman is an agency growth expert and host of eCoffee with Experts, working with founders at the breaking point of scale when growth starts to threaten culture and control. In this episode, he shares how preparation, skill, and self-awareness can replace hustle without losing the business soul.
Your value is not in the execution. If I have to knock that long, it's because I don't have enough skill to yield better results from a smaller amount of input. The idea is to work less and have higher results. Winning does not look like a financial thing. Winning looks like continuing to play the game. When I am myself is when I'm doing my best.
Hey, Austin, I wanted to know a bit about what you've been doing recently and what kind of impact you are giving to your clients.
Yeah, man. It's a great place to start, and thanks for having me on the show. Honestly, my where I've been spending my time focused on and thinking about recently is the concept of rest and like not just like sleep. Okay, so I have this Whoop, this like fitness tracker thing, and I've had it for over a year. Actually, my streak is like 416 days, but no big deal. Yeah, which means I've worn it every single day for the past, year plus. But the concept of rest is underutilized. Let's say that. So where I'm focusing a lot of my time is not necessarily the performance, but what happens leading up to performance. And we can extrapolate this from, marketing campaigns, leadership development, but also like physical fitness. If you think about athletes, like pro athletes or pro musicians, like Justin Bieber or Beyonce or whoever the teeny boppers are listening to these days, or Ronaldo or Messi, like they get paid for a very short period of time. But the reason that they're paid so much for the short period of time is because of their preparation and the ability to bring their experience to life. And I think when I see great leaders or great founders, they're not great because they push really hard, although that just comes with the territory of being an agency founder. You're grinding, you're working long hours, but it's not necessarily how hard they grind, it's how well prepared they are. And so when I'm leading my team, I'm constantly asking, like, not how hard are you pushing today? Like, how packed is your schedule? But it's like, are you well rested today? Have you eaten today? Did you have enough caffeine today? And, I'm taking this back to our CEO, who he is notoriously like touches base with everybody in the company. And we have a 400 plus person company at Digital Web Solutions. So his calendar is packed with meetings, making sure that everybody's cool, like understanding, like obviously he has to have a pulse on the entire organization. But my recommendation to him is, bro, like my input measures, like my leading measures, as far as like podcast hosted, demos taken, outreach messages sent, that is limited. It's almost maxed out. What I want to focus on is the lag measures, which are much more about skill, which might be like deal size or um, sales velocity. How long the period is from initial contact to when the sale comes through. And these skills cannot be improved by pushing harder. They can only be improved by preparing better. And so, where a lot of my time is spent focusing these days is how can I recover deeper, faster, not only with, my physical aspect. We're training for a half marathon. I even have a running hat on that I just got. But it's really about how can I understand prospects better? How can I understand podcast guests better? How can I do more research and then turn around and apply what's already working in other arenas to our ecosystem? And yeah, a lot of that, like this is my movement to kick off the podcast. Like my movement and the message that I hope comes across to founders, agency owners is that your value is not in the execution. Your value actually comes from the level of perspective and your depth of perspective when you come in contact of leaders of networks. I was writing a post about this the other day. But yeah, that is my, that's my main thing is like, how can I prepare better? My success is not determined on my effort. It is determined by my level of preparation.
All right. I just wanted to make some comments because, first of all, you started talking about resting, right? And I'll be honest, I don't sleep a lot. So maybe you're gonna start
Uh-huh.
analyzing me. Okay, he's like, okay, I thought you were
Uh-huh.
doing
Let me
that.
write some notes.
Yeah. So I do in the night. I do sleep like 4 or 5 hour stops, and then I start working. Right. There is a reason why I have that, because I live in Canada. My agency is in the UK, so
Yeah.
I used to wake up at 4 a.m. I work
Hmm.
until midday, and then that was actually a blessing because my kids were small. My son was just born, and then I could take a nap with him around midday, and then I had the rest of the afternoon to spend with my kids, right? But I do take quick naps nowadays, so I sleep a bit less. I wake up a
Hmm.
bit earlier, but I take quick naps, and this kind of like is the way that I keep rested to take my
Hmm.
decisions. And one thing that you mentioned as well is like, and I notice is that if I'm not fully rested, I kind of like there is backslash in people around me, which I
Yeah.
think you will talk about,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
or
Definitely.
this is something you perceived, right? But I wanted to put it out there just to say that when you said that, I'm like, I am
Uh,
afraid of wearing one of these
yeah.
Fitbits or any kind of wearables that will tell me you should sleep more, because I am I work differently. If I sleep a lot, I feel terrible. Like in the weekends, I sleep a bit more. I feel terrible the rest of the day. So for me, I think I got used to sleeping a bit. I sleep like a dog, a bit longer, and then quick naps during the day, like
Yeah.
10 minutes naps sometimes, power naps.
Yeah.
But it was funny. It's like I wanted to talk about that. Take this out of the closet so you can actually bash me or use me as an example to other leaders out there.
Uh-huh.
But But one thing that is really cool is like how you can integrate these with how they lead. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm gonna paraphrase you, but I think a lot of your work is like to help the leaders, get out of the kind of day to day operations, put something like a process in place where they can be more valuable to the whole team, and that's when they wouldn't grind. Is that a fair
Yeah.
assumption?
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, if you think about most agencies, first of all, most of them don't start with with an outcome in mind, whether the exit strategy is to sell or to become a legacy business where they pass it on to, their kids or a trusted, family or friends, or whether that's to, promote internally and like have a C-suite with a CEO and create a board, they remain on the board, but essentially their time is freed up. The exit strategy is about how you exit the role in your business, not necessarily like the business being sold or acquired. So understanding that most agencies when they start as an individual contributor to their own business. They gain experience with somebody else, which is obviously the best training ground is to be paid to learn by somebody else and then say, okay, I have enough knowledge. I'm seeing where either this company lacks and I can do it better, or I'm just proficient enough. I have a big enough network that I can start doing it on my own. And knowing that, most agencies start with like one, two, or three people, and the core service is based on what the founder can execute themselves. So they're not starting with a network in mind. They're not starting with a system, a process in mind. And they tend to build concurrent rings as they exceed their capacity. And a lot of the times it happens where like, all right, my capacity is 100% as a founder. I will only higher when I exceed that 100%. And then I'm already in a state of franticness and being burnt out and stressed. And then when they bring on the new employee, they almost expect like this is where the hiring A players kind of comes in. Is like, oh well, if I just hire an A player, they'll understand the role that I'm hiring them for and they will create all the processes for me because I don't have capacity right now. Like imagine, right? You're working at 100% capacity and then you need to onboard, hire, and train a new employee without a process, right? You have like maybe a general process, but a lot of that information is just trapped inside of their head. And the new hire is a frantic move. It's not planned, right? Uh, so this is what I see in terms of getting agency owners out of the bottleneck. The first one is usually business development, and this is kind of like the founder trap, right? Where they're stuck between BD and operations, like sales and execution. And the sales is the hardest one, it's the hardest hump to get over because most smaller agencies, will call it under seven figures, a majority of their revenue channels are coming from referrals, word of mouth, networking, and potentially even personal brand. So it's like, how do I replace that? Um, and one of the best ways to do that is like we have recordings like this, on Riverside. Most organizations will have a note taker, like an Otter or a Fathom, or I use Plod, which is a great like in-person note taker, but it has a web app. But just like using AI, finding out the process that they go through in terms of a sales conversation. Like, what does that look like? It's rapport, discovery, deeper dive of discovery, um, out like outcome, desired outcomes, and then solution, and then next steps. Like even a simple sales process like that, if it's documented, then when you bring on someone who's in business development, there's some sort of a process. I guess my invitation to those who are listening is to like understand where you are lacking in terms of having a process, whether that's in business development or other operations, and figure out how you can document that, even if it's just you. And then when you bring somebody on, you will find very quickly where the gaps are, and you'll realize how most of the time you won't have all the gaps filled in, I guess. I'm struggling to remember what the original question was, but like when we're talking about scaling agencies, first of all, is business development, and then it's like a a personal assistant, and then business development, and then like a kind of like a department leader in, let's say, SEO or paid ads, and then there'll be like a chief of staff that kind of manages that, and then you can start to build out more and more operations.
Okay. You know why you're struggling to think about the question? Because I never posed the question. I just
Mm.
made an I went through what I assumed you it was your flow, and
Yeah,
then you literally just told me everything. So
there we
thank
go.
you for that.
Uh huh.
So
Uh huh.
I wanted to make a comment about like this process and from my own experience, right? I think I love that you touched the fact that a lot of agencies they start like one, two, or three employees that they work together. They kind of became somewhat friends. They know their strengths and and that's me putting words in your mouth, but based on my experience. So it's like, actually not on you. Like they think that they can do better than their bosses.
Yeah. Yep.
We're gonna be better if we go on our own.
Uh-huh.
Then, as you said, it's like they are not into operations; they are executors. They're pretty good at that. And then in the beginning, maybe they can call some favors, close some big deals, depending on the contract that they have. They can actually get one big client that follows them where they are, and then it's a bit of growthing kind of unplanned startup mode. Let's figure it out. We're gonna keep selling. So I think that comes from my experience. It's like where the processes they are all in their heads, as you said. They improvise a lot of beats, part of the business development. Like how do I get new clients? How do I sell? It's just like this is my portfolio. Let's do this, and then like it's kind of like they don't usually like the sales process at all. They like the
Mm,
execution because that's where they
mhm,
shine. And one point that I wanted to touch and get your experience is more like, from my point of view, a lot of them, they have control issues. Like, I can do this, I'm the freaking most awesome person doing this. I cannot hire anyone because they are never gonna do my quality. How do you
mm,
usually handle this?
mm. Yeah, I love this. And my fiance and I, who she's from Brazil, and we just found that out that you're also Brazilian. So
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, so cool. Uh, so for Christmas every year, we have a tradition where we get each other a book, and just one book. It can either be on a topic that we've been talking about and we think this book would help the other person, or it could be a book that is I've read it before and I'm gifting it to you to help you understand me better. So anyway, the book that I got my fiance this year is called Let Them, or The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins, and it's all about releasing control. Now, I haven't read that, but this was contextual to her because that was something that she was focused on. How this applies to agencies is you can only control obviously what's in your purview. You can't control other people. But what you can do is set up systems and processes, obviously, kind of a buzzword, even though it's been around forever and ever and ever. But what does that actually look like? Well, two of the main things are leading and lag indicators. So, lead are effort based indicators. These are like outreach messages sent, new connections made, new conversations opened, demos held, and like in solar or door to door, it was like doors knocked, conversations had. Um, so those are leading indicators, which are effort based, activity based, and then you have lag indicators, which are skill based. These are like again deal size, close rate, show rate. From trial to recurring. Like these all are dependent on skill. And my recommendation would be if you're looking to make a first hire, like understand what your activity looks like in terms of leading indicators, because with enough activity, you can have a feedback loop to develop the lag indicators. But lag indicators are like skill development can be taught, right? I mean, it's the concept of this podcast. Lag
Mhm.
indicators can be taught, skill indicators are harder to teach and they're harder to find, right? So there's obviously a balance, but in order to do that, in order to feel like you're releasing control, um, you need a feedback loop. There's something called OODA, OODA, observe, orient, decide, act. So what you want to do as a founder is look at like what leading indicators are important to show me that this person is putting in enough activity for me to actually orient and like help them like shift and change around. Maybe this is a daily touch point where you go over your metrics. Obviously, dashboards, if you can, those are going to be the best way to do that. There are plenty of AIs and automations that you can use in terms of like visualizing output. Decide on a the next step or how you're going to change, and then have them go out and execute. Um, so for my team, we have obviously I'm talking with them all day on Teams, but then we also have a weekly one-on-one. Um, and this one-on-one document is going back to the preparation. The one-on-one document is formatted in such a way where they are the one leading the meeting. So I'm not leading their one-on-ones. They are required to fill this document out on Friday. I make my notes over the weekend, and then we have all our one-on-ones on Monday morning. And it kind of looks like I'll just walk through the document if that's cool with you. Like I can just share
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of what
yeah.
it is. Yeah. So we have their main KPIs, key performance indicators, and these can be either leading or lag measures. Usually, I like to have these as lag measures because we have a dashboard for lead measures. So anyway, these are outcomes, KPIs. There's two or three, no more than three. And then we have the main, and then we have resource documents, which is like where are you tracking, where are you showing your work? Those are linked. And then we have the agenda of the call. This is where they will put like the bottlenecks, the challenges that they're having, ideas that they have, initiatives that they're running, and they list those out with context. And if they have a challenge, my invitation to them, and what I ask them to do is to use the 131 framework. I'm not sure where it came from, but I've heard it a couple different times. 131 is clearly define the problem statement that you're trying to solve. Give 3 options to show that you've thought down different avenues, and then bold or highlight your number 1 solution. And then that way I can go through and say, okay, let me give some comments on this. So that's the agenda part. And then underneath that, there are next steps, which get filled out during the get filled out during the one-on-one. And then there's a priority, like next week's priority, which is no more than ideally it should be no more than one priority. If you look at the etymology of the word priority, it basically means there's one. If there's more than one, it's not going to get done. And then underneath priority, there's a rating. How effective was this meeting on a scale of 1 to 5? And then underneath that, there are managers' notes and then employees' notes of how the meeting went. So setting up this sort of a feedback loop, I believe, is the best way that you can release control a little bit more, and understanding that you have inputs and activities that the employee is making, and then you have a system where you can cross reference and you can check and give feedback and help them orient to the next thing.
All right. I really like that because there are some things that you do that I do it myself with my own team, and having the visibility of what each one of them are doing. I am all for to feedback. I have my own
Hmm.
kind of framework that I follow as well. And funny enough, I never called we 131. I always said, like, whenever you come to me with a problem, I want you to come with 3 solutions and your
Hmm.
preferred one, because I'm not here
Nice.
to solve your problem. I'm here to give you my opinion about the choice that you are making, right? So yeah, I like it. It makes sense. 131, right? And one other thing that you mentioned, well, going back into kind of like what started this part of the conversation, which was like the how do you handle this control kind of like necessity, right? And how you and you started talking about processes, right? Or let it be. I forgot the name of the book. Uh,
There's a couple of them.
no,
Uh,
the book that you gave to your fiance.
oh, let them.
Let them, right?
Yeah.
So if when you told that, I'm like, okay, it's kind of like let
Yeah.
them do this the thing. That's
Yeah.
how I read the title, right?
Yeah.
Because that triggered me the thing that is like you need to let go of control, because if you're hiring someone that is a specialist in something, it's like if you have to tell them what to do, then maybe you didn't hire properly,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Right.
And then letting go of this control and being able then to kind of like let them do it their way, that could or could not be better than yours, even if you consider yourself the master of the universe. I think Dan Martell says that like someone doing 80% of what you can do is 100% awesome.
Yeah.
So you don't have to do those 80, right? It's like
Uh-huh.
that's how you read it, right?
Uh-huh.
And this is something that takes them a lot of kind of, for these founders that I've worked with, and the ones that you work with, it seems like that's kind of like a limiting belief that I say that maybe they will drop the quality because I'm not there doing it myself with the standards that I have. But there is a way for you to put some processes in there to, maybe all you have to do is just like do 5% in the beginning, and then you come and do the last 5%, and then that's the quality that you are expecting, or even better than this is. But if you're not willing to let go of this control, you're going to be burning out the midnight oil forever.
Yeah.
And if you fall sick, your whole business goes go where, right? I
Yeah.
don't even have to say it. I ask them like, okay,
Yeah.
so if you fall sick, what happens? Right.
Mhm. Yeah.
So one thing that I wanted to to figure out as well is like I can see just by this kind of like 10-15 minutes conversation that we started to having here, that you're super knowledgeable, that you have already your ethos and a trial and error kind of process. I dare say, or reading books and implementing them and figuring out what works or not. Especially when you went through like how you conduct your one-on-ones. That's kind of like I may be borrowing some part of that. I
Yeah.
need to see that template, right? That's me learning and then trying to apply.
Yeah.
But what actually I'm curious about is that Austin, like, how the hell did you get here? Because I
Uh-huh.
want to know what were your previous experiences, professional and I don't know, personal experiences in life that led you to get to this point where you are.
Mm. Yeah. Hmm. I'm reading a book right now, the book that Bia got me in return
Mhm.
for Let Them, and it's so fascinating. I think it aligns perfectly. But the book is called Behave by Robert Sapolsky, and it's a monster of a read. It's a science book for sure. But the concept of the book is each vertical of science, let's say neuroscience and endocrinology and the study of hormones. We have evolution. We have family sciences, anthropology. Like all of these different sort of verticals are attempting to explain why humans do the behavior that they do. And this book, Behave, actually says, well, it's not just one. There is no one field, one specialty of science that can explain all of why humans do what they do. And he says the concept of the book reads, here's the behavior. This behavior happened. What happened in the seconds before, which goes into like all the neuroscience and the synapses and like how do neurons talk to each other, and like what are the why the neuroscience that happens. But neuroscience is influenced by something else, which is endocrinology or hormones. Like, how did we get the hormones that are activated in the way that they are, which triggered a certain influence of neurons? Uh, so, hormones come from, some of them are genetic, some of them are relational or environment based. What were the days and the weeks like before this? Like what happened in the environment and in the context that led to the hormones being that way, that led to the synapses? Like, am I underslept? Am I overworked? Do I have a lot of stress? How are my relationships? Is my cortisol up, or is my dopamine down because I'm like overstimulated with social media? And then back then, like even before the hormones, why how did I learn to say that 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night is acceptable? Why do I work so hard? That has a lot to do with how you were raised in your family. And then where did those genes come from? It has to do with like the past generations, like maybe the the cavemen hundreds of years ago were the ones who carried the heaviest boulders, and those genes got passed on, and therefore that passed down the trait of hard work all the way back to cultural and blah blah blah. So anyway, this book is totally fascinating, and how I got to where I'm at now, uh although I can't see really that far past when I was born. I grew up on a small farm in Ohio, and it was under 1,000 people in my town. I graduated with 77 people in my class, and I was like, I did not like it. I was like, I want to get out of here as fast as I can. After my class graduated our senior year from high school, I was the first one to enroll in university and the first one to leave the town and go to university. And from there, I was like, I need bigger and bigger and bigger. I need to like go out and explore and do things. I'm in a men's group where we met yesterday, and we talked about the concept was finding joy. And we looked at, from 0 to 13 years old, 14 to 25, and 26 to now, basically, and list out what gives you joy. And then we tracked patterns over those three different age kind of epochs. And I found that what really gave me joy was striving, exploration, and building, basically. And those took various different shapes. But that's kind of like what I was pursuing in any different part of my life. So where that really started to evolve was in 2018. I was living in Columbus, Ohio, went to Ohio State, had graduated a couple years prior, had a very bad experience with a roommate. And this was actually in my first door to door experience in 2018. Bad experience with a roommate. I moved back to the town with my mom, and I was like, there has got to be a better way. I have a degree from the Ohio State University, but my history has been working in a call center, which I hated and didn't use my degree. I worked at a restaurant. I was a bartender for 5 or 6 years or so. And then I went into door to door, and I was just like, there was a couple other experiences there. And I was like, this can't be it. So my first entrepreneurial venture was developing a program which I called Mantra Mind Management. And the concept, I partnered with local nonprofits and local manufacturing businesses. And I set up a micro, I called it micropreneurship, where it was talking with high school students, and I set up like one day or like up to 1 week um, internships with local businesses to experience different roles on a small scale before they actually graduated and had to go select their major and then invest a bunch of money, only to 4 years later find out when they enter the workforce. Teaching is a perfect example. My sister was a teacher. The classroom setting of university was very different from the actual environment where she worked. So I was like, well, why don't we try and figure that out before you have to go and learn and understand the outcome first? So that was my first entrepreneurial experience, which led me into understanding. I worked at a company called Mind Valley, which is in Malaysia. Their headquarters are in Malaysia. It's a personal development company, meditation oriented, personal growth, relationships, all of that. So I worked in Malaysia for over a year. Met a girlfriend at the time who was from South America. During the pandemic, we moved to Turkey, Istanbul. I lived there for 6-ish months and was running my own kind of like life coaching business, I guess. And I got drawn back to the US. My best friend uh, was having a bachelor party in Scottsdale, Arizona. I went there. And then when I went back to Ohio, it took me a month, and I got a commission only job in door to door solar, which brought me back out to Arizona. And then I stayed in door to door solar for over 3 years, built teams in Arizona and California, and then stayed in touch, funny enough, 5 years later with one of my colleagues from Mind Valley, who was running a community for agency owners, and said, I'm looking to get out of this. I have a startup. He pulled me in. I was a community manager. This is where I worked with Neil Patel and Eric Sue. And from there, I mean, that's kind of how I entered the SEO, agency owner world. And that was like in 2023, I guess. So it's been like, yeah, 2.5, 3 years. So all of that experience contributed to like it's my like mission and role to help founders build their life in the center and then build their work around it, which is not the case for majority of the people that I talk to.
I'll be honest, it's fascinating. Even the beginning of your answer that touched this book, right? So you found out that I'm Brazilian a
Yeah.
bit before this interview, this chat started, and I'm I'm almost 100% sure that you don't know that I studied biology.
No way. No, I
Yes.
didn't know.
So when you
That's
were
awesome.
talking about the book, I'm like, awesome, I did that. Awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
I studied that, right? And and the thing is that even going to the evolution side, right? So I studied a bit and I was fascinated about biology. I was fascinated about evolution. I ended up going towards evolution in plants and then in the education side, but I always thought about the evolution of the human with time when I started getting into more psychology, social psychology, how we behave, the way we behave. That's why, like, when you started talking about this book, and I'm like, okay, should I start buying here on Amazon while he's
Yeah.
speaking? So, and 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 it was funny because you mentioned a pathway that I've been thinking a lot about, like the way we behave, right? it There's a lot of baggage that comes from evolution, right? But each since we are born, each one of us, we have different experiences, right? And those experiences kind of, if we allow them to be, even if it's like a bad experience or a good one, and then we kind of like understand that life happens and then like we need to adapt, right? That's the whole concept of evolution in the end of the day, right? If we adapt and we see that not as like a victimized kind of thing, but it's more like, okay, that left me some scars, now I'm a bit more resilient, where can I go, right? And that's kind of the pathway that was following you and the experiences that you have. And one of them is kind of like the selling door to door, the being born in a farm environment.
Yeah.
What, like, I kept thinking like, okay, did you have to work in a farm? What did you have to do? Which were, because there are different chores and different kind of raising kids in a farm,
Hmm.
in a big city, if you live in a big city in a house, or if you live in a big city in a small apartment, if it's like a big city that is kind of rich or a big city that is chaotic, different things. And like, as I said, and it's cultural as well, right? It's like depending on the city where you live in, you have your kind of small city mentality that I call. And trust me, I'm from São Paulo in Brazil, big city, lived in a house. My wife is from São Paulo. She lived in an apartment her whole life. And we have different values for a lot of stuff, right? Even like, and how this leads to some of the solutions and ethos that I currently do. And I can see that, like, even like your experience of selling door to door, right? What did that bring in terms of the way that you treat your team members, or the way that you treat your clients that don't really like to sell, right? So these are some of the things that I was thinking about as you were explaining. But I, and you mentioned Mind Valley, right? I know that they have a big YouTube. I know one guy that, to be honest, all my
Vision.
trajectory, Vision, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
He's the kind of like the
CEO, founder.
the CEO,
Yeah.
exact, the founder, right? But before I found out about Vision, I found about a guy called Eric Edmeades. I can't remember his.
Ed
You
meets.
know who I'm.
Yeah.
Edmeades. Yeah, I
Uh-huh.
never know how to pronounce his surname, right? So I went into the public speaking because I found out about him, right? I don't know if you know, there was one guy that I am part of his community. His name is Chris Doe. He's super known on the creative with the future community. And he talked about Eric. And then I like, Chris is telling me to go do that. I was like, I'm going to study all about that. And that's when it led me to Mind Valley. And I wanted to, if you don't mind me, I wanted to dig a bit more into your experience selling door to door and
Yeah.
this comparison with Mind Valley experience and what that kind of like glued together.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So the ethos of door to door when I started in 2021 was different when I ended in 2024, I guess. Yeah. And I noticed the industry shift, and now the industry is in a very different place in 2026. Um, a lot of it was governed by, the tax policies in the US, and I had to learn a lot about that. But what I guess this is a perfect indication of, or a perfect representative of, leading versus lag indicators. So there are, when you start, most people who start in door to door, they don't have door to door experience. They're there because they understand it's a big financial opportunity. And, the people who are on the stages at like Door to Door Con and Solar Con, who's, is run by a friend of mine, they are, they're saying, I can knock 4 hours a day and I make, 200 grand a year. And people are like, what? How do you even do that? So it's very attractive for people who don't have much of a career trajectory. to enter and feel like they can, with enough hard work, you can make something of yourself. So it attracts a certain type of person. And I was that person because I know I have a very strong work ethic, but I felt very lost in my career. So what I realize is, yes, I can, as long as I'm hitting my lead metrics, like hours in the field, doors knocked, conversations had, then those, as long as I was hitting those, then I can improve the lag metrics, which are appointments set, appointments run, close rate, install rate. Like those are lag metrics, right? And I think what I noticed is that there are two types of people, and they're the type of people who focus more on the lead metrics, and there are type who focus more on the lag metrics. And I am very much in the latter. I'm like, okay, I want to build my life in the center, and I want to build my work around it. So I don't want to knock for 12 hours a day. It's Arizona in the summer, like it's 120 degrees out here. I will if I have to, but it's only because if I have to knock that long, it's because I don't have enough skill to yield better results from a smaller amount of input. And what I realized kind of to, what we were talking about earlier with rest and sleep and recovery and reflection, that is the only way basically where we can get better at increasing the lag metrics. Like, but we have to have enough input data in order to find patterns to then compare to industry best practices and, to see what's working. So there is a certain amount of imbalance when it comes to starting any new endeavor or new project or whatever. You have to have enough input data to find the patterns. And then you can start to improve. And then the idea is to work less and have higher results. Like by the time I was exiting the industry, I was still knocking for probably 3 to 4 hours a day, but a lot of it was training my team, making sure that they like could see how I was doing things, and then they could learn through osmosis and adapt. But when I was leading teams, um, no other team would have training every day, and definitely they would not have training at 8 AM. Like, the knocking day starts usually at, like, 3 o'clock PM, and it will go until sundown, which during the summer can be, like, 8 o'clock. That's 5 hours of knocking. But in the winter, sun goes down at, like, 6, so you have to adapt. But anyway, with that sort of later schedule, how do you get people to show up for an 8 AM training 5 days a week? That's really tough to do. And what I found is having visibility on the metrics was something that was very important, and having that feedback loop every day where they could literally go out and produce, if not appointments and deals, they could still produce they could still produce like effort and have something to show for it that they could then get feedback on. So even if they're not getting the results that they want, they at least have some sort of evidence that they can bring. And this is a completely separate subject, but we'll talk about it because it's very interesting. But they could get the emotional payout of growing, even though they weren't getting the financial payout of closing the deals. And this sort of like, this is going into again like emotional intelligence. Like, a lot of the times when I see founders struggling, they are struggling financially, but they'll stay in that position for a long time because they're getting paid emotionally from something else. And it's counterintuitive because when you talk with them, you'll see them be very animated and like, this is so hard. I'm struggling. These things are, these external factors are throwing me off and I can't seem to figure this out. And like, as you have this conversation with them, you realize they like talking about this. They like being in this position where they are struggling because in the conversations that they're having with people who are normies, or in solar we call them wages, the people who are earning a like an hourly wage or a salary, like those people will give them a lot of credit, and they'll say, "You're so courageous. I could never do what you're doing. Like, that seems so hard. Like, wow, you are such a strong person. You have a way harder work ethic than me." All of this social validation is the emotional payout that keeps them stuck in this cycle, because if they actually figured it out and started to achieve their goals, then you have this concept where In the wheat field, all the wheat is the same, but if you have one that's taller than all the rest, it gets cut down. And that is a very ostracizing and uncomfortable position to be in, particularly if your friend group are all at a certain level. So I that's what I realize is like the emotional drivers are typically the ones paying the bill on the inside, and it's not necessarily the financial payout. So I had to understand this in solar and say like, okay, let's connect your financial outcomes with an emotional outcome, which is a lot harder to do than you think. But you cannot do that just by pushing harder. In order to dig deep and find those emotional payouts, you have to reflect, be honest with yourself, and really like get to the root of it through space and through rest. What a wild world.
Yes. Oh my God. It's like, and it was it was enlightening to see that your experience with door to door, which is something that my dad tried to make me do it when I was a teenager. It was like, I love my dad, and he put me in situations that I hated him when I was a kid, right? Even like
Mhm,
selling stuff. I remember we went on holidays to a beach,
mhm,
and then he had a factory of like aluminum kind of pans and cups and everything. We were four boys. He had four boys, and he
mm.
picked me to go and sell in the beach close to my friends, like in every spot of the. And then I'm like, oh my god, that don't.
Oh my.
He did that, and kind of we could have a whole podcast just talking about really embarrassing situations that made me who I am, right? But I think one thing that you mentioned when you were talking about your experience at door to door, and I realized that from that moment when you started doing that, that's a really metric driven kind of industry. And I've worked with some salespeople, and then I was like, they have metrics. And one thing that I realized, because now you're working with creatives, and let me see if you notice that association as well. Because we know that creatives, they come from a different place, right? It's like the way they study, or it's like it's kind of like inspirational. It's something from within. They are not data driven by default, right? And the biggest resistance is this, like getting the way of thinking and operating into a structured way that then can become data driven. So it's a process, and then you have the KPIs, and this is what you're gonna do, and then you follow. It's kind of against their nature, right?
Yeah.
Whilst your experience and mine, they are completely different. My data driven only came when I studied biology, and then it was like data driven in a
Mm.
super structured way that other people they have to replicate to see if you're not full of BS,
Yeah.
right? But that came to me honestly in my 20s,
Yeah.
right? Early 20s. That's when I was kind of in the university, right? And I kept thinking, like, when you were saying that, I'm like, oh, that explains a lot why it's so hard for some founders of the creative space to
Mhm,
get to understand what you do, what I do too,
mhm,
right? And funny enough, when you said previously, when you said that you worked in like in life coaching,
mm,
the way that I read your history in there is that you realize that you there was a game in the system where using the metrics you could optimize that. And I don't know, that's an assumption, so forgive me if I make that, and then correct me if I make that, right? But when you were talking about the different times of the day, I kept thinking, from all my experience, when I worked like for a really short period of time in a farm environment, you have to be aware of different times. Like you wake up really early because before the sun comes up, and then you have to do that. Like, so you start early as well. I went to some places where they didn't even have power. So the day actually ended before 7 p.m. And it was like, lamps and candles, and that's it. And even the adjustment that you were talking about, the sales in winter, sales in summer, and how you kind of affect that, it kind of like gave this is, I don't know, my assumption in there, maybe your previous experience with farm, or like in that area everyone had that thing, knowing that this is going to get too hot, right? And for you that was important and made you kind of create this emotional intelligence, or kind of like second level street smart intelligence that are like, I'm gonna get this data, I'm gonna focus in here, right? And then build on top of that. So you ended up optimizing your flow for sales that made you grow in your profession to a point that then you started leading some people, training them,
Mhm.
right? And now it's kind of bringing things. I don't know, a lot of assumptions in there, so please bash me.
Well, I think the overarching idea is that there is no one way to do anything, right? There can be best practices, sure. However, there's also a caveat where a best practice is best for that person in that environment and at that time. In the Behave book, I literally just read this yesterday, but he was talking about cultural upbringing and how growing up in different cultures, seeing the same stimulus now will have a different outcome. Play this game with me, all right? You grew up in Brazil, so I'm not sure how this will fare, but the yeah. So you have three objects, right? You're looking at three objects on a piece of paper. They're all drawings. One is a monkey, one is a bear, and one is a banana. Group two of these objects out of the three.
For me it's the banana and monkey. It's like that was like automatically.
Okay, why is that?
I'm Brazilian, man. We always talk about Brazil and monkeys, and the monkeys eat banana. That's kind of the way it came.
In this study, which he's reporting, it was between US and Koreans. And he said they grouped them differently based on the same stimulus. The US grouped the monkey and the bear together because those are animals that both have brown fur. But in Korea, they grouped the monkey and the banana together because it was a relational grouping. Monkeys need bananas to eat, to live, to eat. So just that sort of a perspective is like you can see the same stimulus, but depending on a whole bunch of different factors, like you'll be good or not good, right? Best practices are just like what other people, with enough data points, obviously you can see like it's very clear. Like, don't, if you're trying to do business development, don't call somebody at 2 a.m. It's like, okay, that's pretty universal, right? But I think what I've noticed over the years is that if you imagine a seed, a cactus seed, and like a redwood tree like that grow in Northern California, if you plant a cactus seed in the Arctic or somewhere tropical, like it won't grow, and it's not because it's a bad seed. It's because it's in the wrong environment. And the same thing with any other seed that requires the correct environment. But a lot of the times we will attribute our success. I think it was like Einstein or something, like, don't gauge the success of a fish by how well it can climb a tree. And that's what I see over and over again. And this is what separates like the great founders who are able to stay in it for the long term versus the founders who are struggling and they burn out, is because maybe they're the seed that they are, what they're naturally good at, their talents, their skills, and their desires and interests are being challenged. Like they're creative and they're put in an analytical environment. It's very difficult to stay into that for a long time. Whereas if they made a slight shift and supplemented somebody to supplement their weaknesses, a data person who can share, how the creative output is being perceived through numbers and analytics, then you can, have a longer term, more successful business. I mean, let's be honest, like there are a few there are a few cases that we see of people, startup founders who boom, right place, right time, right experience, supply and demand, like they come together at the apex, and their business just pops. But it doesn't pop in 3 months. It pops usually behind the scenes after the press release, after the LinkedIn stuff. You see that they've been chipping away at something for 2, 3 years, sometimes a year, but usually it's a couple years. And but you look at like Vision from Mind Valley. Mind Valley is over 20 years old as a company. I think it was founded in 2001. So they're a quarter century old. Why is Mind Valley a nine-figure business? Is not because, it was the most strategic and it has the best products, but it's because the founder was able to sustain the longest. Simon Sinek has that book called The Infinite Game, and I think that is the most crucial part to success for founders is if you want to have a successful agency, it will take a long time. And in order for you to be in the game long enough, winning does not look like a financial thing. Winning looks like continuing to play the game. And you can only do that if your seed is planted in the right environment. So, like, taking all of these concepts together and understanding that there's a lot outside of our control, it takes immense amounts of self awareness and reflection to understand where you can plant your seed so that it has the greatest likelihood of evolving and growing the fastest and over the long term.
Yeah. To this last point, I love the idea of the seed as well. I'll say the analogy that I always used was of a plant, right?
Mm.
Which is already past the seed. It's already grew a bit, but then
Uh-huh.
if there are some plants, they thrive in the shadows, while others like they you could put them under the sun and they burn, right? And the analogy that came to me like with your seed analogy was more like I can take the plant. It's not thriving here because maybe it's not under the sun. It's kind of in here. It's a strategic move that then thrives, and over some time it takes forever, right? And then then you can grow. Sometimes it's this shift. And one thing that I wanted to touch is that on previous conversations in me my podcast in here, I think there is a tendency of even with agency owners to kind of glorify the startup and unicorn world in a sense that I will be freaking famous and my agency will be awesome in half a year, right? And sometimes they go like, no, all I need is like an investor to so I can buy it. I can hire all the players and everything, which goes back into something that you mentioned that like you can grow without selling your soul. And I usually when I say that selling your soul, I usually say that weirdly enough. I work with that nowadays, but selling your soul in a way that you sell your business just because of money and then you lose complete control because of that sometimes poor decision that you had a vision that was awesome and then someone with a big check comes, they are like, I love your vision, let's do it together, and then like once you're bought you're out of here, right? So this is kind of like what triggered me, and I wanted you to dig a bit more like in terms of how you handle this growth of having this kind of willingness to figuring out like I'm a founder. I know that I hit my limit. How do I grow here without selling my soul in the sense that I put together? How do you consider selling your soul from your perspective, and where you can actually help them most effectively right in the beginning?
I think success is doing more of what you want and less of what you don't want. Like, everyone will define success differently, but I mean, you can. I'm pretty certain that if you ask somebody, like, I could double your, salary, double your income, triple whatever it takes, uh, but you have to do something that you hate every day for 8 to 12 hours. Would you do it? Probably not. Like, I would say most people would say no. It's not worth it for me, right? You see this with uh, particularly, I mean, agency owners are a great a great example, but you'll see this with like lawyers or people who work on Wall Street, stock markets, whatever, where, or, even strategy consultants at like BCG or Deloitte. They're working extremely long hours, but they're being paid very handsomely. It's like, great. Maybe if you're in your 20s to like early in your career, like you can do that. You can burn the midnight oil because you don't have a family, you don't have like big obligations, and you understand that I can push for a short period of time, stack the cash, and then, when I exit this period, I'll be much better off. It's a nice thought, but it's very difficult to do because of the emotion that happens when you receive the paycheck. Imagine like you're working 12 plus hour days, and you're not able to enjoy the money that you're earning. And then as soon as you have a break, as soon as you get that paycheck, where does it go? I deserve this. I worked really hard for this. I've been wanting this all the time. All that money goes out the window to make up for the lack of fulfillment that it took in order to earn that money in the first place. So last year, I my life completely changed, and it was from one night. I did my fiance got me my birthday gift was a night where I could do ayahuasca with the shaman. I don't know if you're familiar with
Right.
ayahuasca.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I know,
Yeah,
I know.
yeah. So I did ayahuasca last year over my birthday weekend, and my life completely changed, like who I am now. And the takeaway for me, if I could sum it up in one sentence, is I am infinite and insignificant. Everything I do, like, I can do and, like, I can be whatever I want to be, and my power is absolutely limitless, my opportunity is absolutely limitless, and it doesn't matter. It does not matter, like, whether I achieve my goals in this way or this way, whether I work from home, whether I work 12 hours or 4, like, it doesn't matter. All that matters is that I'm doing my best. Like, to me, that is success. When somebody asks me, "Who are you?" Like, and I would invite everyone to ask themselves, like, "Who am I really?" Like, without if I was dropped on a deserted island and I didn't have my network, I didn't have my accolades, I didn't have my job description, nothing, right? Who am I? Like, what value do I have? And I asked myself this question during this shamanic experience, I suppose, and what came through to me is it's not who am I, it's when am I Austin? And when I am myself is when I'm doing my best. And if it's when I'm in a scenario where I'm doing something that I hate, I'm not doing my best. And therefore I feel friction internally because I'm like, this is not who I am. When people are in that experience, they're like, man, I'm selling my soul for money. That's not who I am. Why is that? It's because you're not doing your best. But when you're in a creative space and maybe you're not earning the money that you want to be earning, you're like, man, this is me. This is absolutely me. Like that sort of emotional payout is worth more than the reported outcome that you're telling the press. By the press, I mean like your family, friends, social media, whatever. The internal payout is what really matters. So all of that to say, like, if you want to be in business for the long term, it's all about finding where the environment in which your seed will grow the easiest, finding where you can do your best, be your best, and then honestly just like making sure your leading indicators are up to par, like industry standard or above. Like look around, obviously you can learn from other people, but then understanding like how can I leverage my unique position in order to increase my lag indicators. A perfect example is jumping on this podcast. I feel that I know because I've received feedback from many people that I bring value by sharing stories and sharing perspectives from my own experience. And that is associated with bringing new business to Digital Web Solutions, the current position that I'm in right now. I'm a podcast host as well as a partnerships manager. So I could either spend my days like doing demo calls 30 minutes a day and like talking one-on-one to, individual business owners, decision makers. That's been the strategy in the past. Or I could leverage what I love to do, which is being conversations with other like-minded people who have a similar audience and who, someone in the audience may find value in what I say, and I can leverage my skills to achieve the outcome of the goal that I want. But the outcome is not necessarily the point to me. The point to me is, am I getting paid? Am I getting paid emotionally in a healthy way? Am I getting paid emotionally in a healthy way? And if I can do that for a long enough time, do I see a path forward where my energy, my relationships, my vision, my experience, can that be of value to someone else? And if it can, then I have the bean counters or the data people say, this is what it's worth in the marketplace. That's my shtick. And get enough sleep.
Yeah, you're allowed to pull my leg about
Uh-huh.
that every time we meet, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm just thinking about at this point that I am infinite and am insignificant, right? Like I'm paraphrasing you. Hopefully, I did it properly,
That's
right?
it.
And
That's it.
the way I see this is it kind of like it hit a string, it hit a
Yeah.
chord down there,
Yeah.
right? Because immediately I thought, whenever someone thinks too much of themselves, this is like, think about the size of the earth in the universe, and you are like a nothing inside of the size of the earth, right?
Yeah.
And one thing that you mentioned as well is like when I am,
Mm.
right? That thing is like it's so funny because as we were discussing before, you're not born like thinking I'm Austin. I am a podcaster, and then I work with agency owners. Like again, it's like a bunch of moments that tailored you to be who you are right now, right? And I love that you touched that because, and I find it funny because it was through a podcast that we came together. Through conversations now that we're kind of like, okay, man, it's like you think that there are many things that you think that are really that are aligned, right? And I'll share something that I'm experimenting, which is like how people are using AI. It's too transactional. Do this for me pretty quickly, and then how can I make money really quickly with that? While I'm using AI a lot to either learn more and figure out ways to apply this learning, but more of that, like to figure out when I am. And it was so it's like it's who I am right now is nice in a snapshot that for you summarize when I am. Like for context, one of the most provocative ways that I do when I meet someone new in a party or something, right? Everyone's, hey, what do you do? Like, where are you from? And then I started testing these with some people. Like, "Hey, but it's like, Austin, uh, you come to me, hi, I'm Austin. I'm glad to. And then I say like, who's Austin? And like me. I'm like, but who are you? And they're like,
Mm.
what do you mean? I
Uh-huh.
I am a podcaster. I'm like, no, 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 no. Then I said, I stopped. I'm like, "No, this is like what you do. It's like I'm asking who you are.
Mm.
And they're like, right? So that was an experiment that I did, right? But when you said like when I am through your experience with how do you call it, ayahuasca, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So for context, like I studied plants, so I know what it is. You
Yeah.
make like the indigenous people in as far as I know, like Central and like maybe kind of Central America. I think is in Mexico, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Brazil, bro.
Brazil too.
Brazil
Brazil too.
and
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I was going to say from like bottom of the
Peru.
North America to down to Peru. Yeah, that's what I knew. It's just I
Yeah.
I found out recently that in Mexico they did too, right? I
Mhm.
watched a
Mhm.
Netflix documentary about some kids that got lost, and then they found out the kids after drinking that, right? So you put a lot of plants in there. It's a recipe that shamans they used for centuries or maybe more, And then it makes you kind of like, I don't know, the way I would say, and you experienced, I didn't, but it's more like it allows you to kind of see things from a different sphere, a different dimension, right? and and that's kind of like the revelations that you get to do that. Is like, I mean, I can't say I know some people that did the same thing, right? Not all of them had the same outcome, of course, but it was, you see, it was pretty interesting to see that at this point of your life you kind of ended up doing that, and that changed your life. Like one moment changes your life, and then that affects not only your personal life but the way you do your work, how you behave and your ethos
Mm.
professionally, how this
Yeah.
affects your life.
Mhm.
Austin, I think we could, oh my god, I can think of like at least 20 tangents that we could go in
I
here.
know, I know.
Yeah, right. But before we end this, like in this high, I wanted to know a bit more, like if people need to find you, they want to know more about you, they kind of like, I need to work with this guy, right? I resonate with a lot of things. Where can they find you?
Yeah, man, I love it. Hit me up on LinkedIn, Austin Willman, not Williams, Austin Willman. I'm sure you'll include it in the show notes. And then if you want to book a time on my calendar, you can use my Bitly, bit.ly/Austin DWS. That's the easiest way to book a time on my calendar. Agency owners, founders, SEO agencies, obviously, we can help you with white label SEO services. Or if you just want to talk about your business development, new client acquisition, or operations, making it more efficient, leadership, like all of that is right down the center for me.
And I think if someone listening to this, they didn't get like all your expertise in there and where you can figure that out, it's like, oh my god, watch it again.
Yeah.
All right, Austin, thank you so much for coming in here, giving you all this expertise, your experiences. It was awesome, and I hope we could kind of do this together another
Yeah,
time.
same. Thank you, Glesley. Appreciate you, man.
All right.